Belarus has temporarily restricted access to parts of its southeastern region that borders Ukraine and Russia. The government said it will close the border zone and restrict movement within it. Russia and Belarus are currently participating in a series of joint military operations. Russian forces used Belarus as a launch pad for their abortive attack on the Ukrainian capital Kyiv in February, and there's been growing Russian and Belarusian military activity in recent months. Russia's President Putin visited Belarus earlier this week, fueling fears that Russia may be planning a second assault on Kyiv. Well, to look at this in more detail, I'm joined by the Eastern European Affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And let's start with, first of all, President Zelensky's surprise visit to the United States. In the last few hours or so, we've had reaction from the Kremlin to that visit. President Putin's spokesman said that because the range of weapons being supplied to Ukraine was increasing, this would lead to an aggravation of the conflict, and that this does not bode well for Ukraine. What do you make of that?
What is happening now is that indeed there is a further slow escalation. The visit by the Ukrainian president to the USA has unfortunately had one effect and one good effect. One good effect is that the USA is supporting Ukraine. This is very important. But the bad effect of it is that it gives the distinct impression that USA is now wholeheartedly and solely on the side of Ukraine, which is indeed compatible with all the statements it's made over the months, which means that we are slowly but surely coming into a situation of a confrontation. Whether President Putin decides at any given moment to make any of America's gestures or statements or supplies of aid a casus belli for a further assault remains to be seen. But it's, as I've been saying over the previous weeks, I anticipate Russia, in the face of this, not backing down, but escalating further. The only question is, will the assault on Kiev be purely conventional, or will President Putin make use of his vast array of nuclear weapons? Because he is constantly hinting over the past few weeks that he is indeed prepared to do so.
And I suppose, Dr. Laskiewicz, that Mr. Zelensky has tried to pave the way for this visit by reminding the world that there's a Russian troop build-up near the border again, and that there may be another attempt to take Kyiv by Russia. So it sounds like what he's saying to the Americans and Europeans is that this is not the time to be weak, but to double down.
Well, yes and no. The first point is I fully agree that there is indeed a possibility, and I personally think it's near on a certainty, that the Russians will indeed attack from the north, from Belarus, because this is what they did in February, on February the 24th, and in that week. So therefore, I anticipate exactly the same occurring. Russia, after all, has been increasing its forces, and so this is going to be, as it by all appearances, and I personally repeat, I think it's nearly a certainty that they will so attack. The question is, attack purely Kiev, because obviously Lviv rather, is also a possibility for an assault, because it is the main conduit for the arms to arrive in Ukraine. And of course, there's also Odessa. And my point is that if we here in the West decide that we're going to solely support Ukraine no matter what, and this is your point about being strong, well, yes, it is very important to do so. But I also said no, because what is missing in all this, and I repeat, is any, even remote, talks of peace. If there is no talk of peace, then this war will escalate. Sooner or later, it will go to phase 4, which is some sort of nuclear war. That is the problem. So the answer is, it's not a question of merely being seen to be strong, but at the same time working out on what terms this war could be finished.
Meanwhile, of course, Dr. Laskiewicz, as you mentioned there, Russia unveiling plans to boost the size of its armed forces by 30% to 1.5 million troops. President Putin and his defense minister, though, have admitted problems during the recent mobilization of hundreds of thousands of reservists for the war in Ukraine, saying mobilization had posed a serious test. What do you read into that?
Well, it's quite clear that Russia has problems in the military sense of mobilizing. It has problems, presumably, in getting enough missiles. These are well-known problems and would further lend, I think, support to the idea that were peace to be seriously suggested, they might well agree. However, Russia, if you read the history books, has always had problems in mobilizing and getting supplies. And this has been a persistent problem throughout the whole of Russian history. But Russia, nevertheless, has conquered as won before. So on the one hand, whilst we can read into the fact that it is certainly not easy for the Russians, please note that Russia has in the past coped with such problems. Moreover, it is quite clear that President Putin is resolved to fight on. So any thought that there's going to be an immediate collapse of Russia or that Russia will simply not be able to carry on, I think must be put aside. And we must instead think that whatever the problems are, Russia presumably will be thinking in terms of an assault to try and break Ukrainian resistance. I personally would not be surprised to see it happening over the New Year or indeed Christmas, sometime when the attention of the world is otherwise engaged.
Dr. Marek, I want to thank you very much indeed, as always. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the Eastern European Affairs Analyst, and he was giving me his assessment of the latest developments around Ukraine.